I'm beginning this with another painting by my husband, painted maybe 20 years ago. It took him 8 years to paint. And it really gives us this, everything that I've been talking about is contained in this one picture. There's the missing archetype, as it were, that's been excluded from spirit in Western civilization. And the alchemists honored this archetype in the image of the queen and divine wisdom and made it central to their work. So I think today the feminine archetype, bearing the child of the new consciousness and set within the matrix of nature, is emerging within us and within our culture, although not without quite a struggle. But nevertheless, these things move in mysterious ways, and we just don't know how things are going to change or what might happen. Even the volcano erupting has shown how dependent we are on air travel and how helpless we are trying to get around in other ways now. So this changes confidence. And also all of the relationships that people will have had, the camaraderie that will have been built up, all sorts of unexpected things will have come out of this, as well as the actual watching of the huge eruption. So now we come to the greater work, which the alchemists called the Robideaux, or the rising dawn, because that's what it means. And it really has two phases. One is the first sort of appearance of the sun on the horizon as it begins to come up, and the other is the full awakening, as it were, when the sun is at the zenith. The full gold of the sun is revealed. And this is about the creation of the red stone symbolized by the young king. Remember that the final stage of the albedo was symbolized by the young queen. So the young king symbolizes the illumined consciousness, which is the red tincture, stone, or universal medicine that can heal all afflictions. The powers that impede or destroy the work have been overcome. All the negativity, all the resistance, all the denial and the ridicule or contempt that has been heaped on new ideas and, there have been wonderful, wonderful philosophers like Spinoza in the past who were neglected and then who come up again. People rediscover them. So this final stage is about the creation of the immortal body of light. It's about the integration of body, soul, and spirit, and the union with the divine ground. They likened this final stage to the resurrection and to the reddening of the sky as the sun rises to the zenith, irradiating and warming the earth. Red gold is the color of the Robideaux, and the red rose and red stone are symbols of the completion of the greater work. It signifies the awakening to awareness of spirit as guide and companion within the illumined soul. A primary symbol of the Robideaux is the phoenix, new life regenerated from the ashes of the old. So there are your ashes from the calcinatio. Other symbols are the quintessential gold, or the divine elixir, flower of immortality, the heavenly balsam, the perfume of flowers, and the celestial blue color. But there are many others as well. Now, these are only just a very few of them. So the Robideaux is about resurrection and transfiguration. It's about the creation of this body of light, or immortal body, which survives death, and about the union of body, soul, and spirit in the rising and full radiance of the sun. So it's about fulfillment and union, wholeness, and union with the divine ground, or the unus mundus. I had a lovely time working with all the colours on PowerPoint with these things. This is actually, I start with the images and then I work from the images to the text, because it's the images that really activate my feeling of relationship much more than the writing. And here we have again Zosimus. I swear to you that if you do this work properly, you will have a river of flowing gold. I should say that some of the alchemists had what they called a soror mystica, often their wife, who worked with them, like Nicholas Flamel and Peronella. They were brother and sister, so to speak. So that's something, and Zosimus was one of them. I can't remember the name of his soror mystica. Can anybody remember it? No? You might know about it. So the stages of the Robideaux are governed by earth and air. The first were governed by fire and water, and now we have earth and air. And these are the different aspects or phases. You have the coagulatio, that means coagulating the material, the matter, sublimating it, its multiplication, and then fixing it, which I'll talk about in some length. And then finally, the conjunctio. And the alchemist said, we are tried in the fire and rendered into gold. So they said, sublimate the body and coagulate the spirit. That didn't mean sacrifice the body. Sublimating the body is really lifting it into what it truly is, seeing it as the vehicle of spirit, or as incarnate spirit, really. And coagulating the spirit is about bringing the spirit down to earth, giving it some form of material manifestation, as in the great builders of Chartres Cathedral, as with Mozart, or any great artist or creative spirit. I was thinking of James Lovelock, just popped into my mind. Did any of you see that program on him? It was absolutely wonderful. Well, there is an alchemist, completely, and such a humble and wise man. And he has discovered, first of all, the gap in the ozone layer, which was very dangerous and which he warned everybody about. And now this understanding of the biosphere. And I think probably he'll go even further, but he's given us all a terrible warning, but he's given it in a spirit of great compassion and really love for the earth. Also, someone mentioned to me in the break that the discovery of chaos theory was a tremendous shock, really, to scientists, because they'd been going on the Newtonian theory. Chaos theory is totally different because it gives the idea that there's an order within this chaos, which they hadn't understood before, hadn't known about before. And also with science, there was something called M theory, which was the idea of an enclosing kind of womb, really, of a dimension that was so vast that it enclosed all other dimensions within it. So these are interesting ideas that are coming up. There's also string theory, many dimensions folded in within each other. Lots of ideas that haven't yet been truly coagulated. They're in the process of coagulating. So sublimating the body is about lifting it from the low position that's been assigned to it by religions, literally redeeming this neglected aspect of spirit. And this, of course, has huge implications for the way we treat matter and the earth, as well as our own bodies, the casual way we relate to what we're eating, sexual relationships, everything really, the way we treat old people, and above all, the way we treat our children, which I think is catastrophic. Children come in with such a sensitive psyche and with such a wonderful beauty, really, and so much is destroyed by our educational system, not only by the cruelty of other children, which grown-ups don't seem to be able to contain, but also by the way they're taught. And I don't know. It's quite agonizing for me as a grandmother. So coagulating the spirit is about earthing the insights that have been gained and bringing them into our relationships and our work. The phases and stages of alchemy blend imperceptibly into each other, and they're repeated over and over again in the process called the circulatio, as the threefold union of body, soul, and spirit proceeds. For there is not one awakening, but many, not one illumination, but many. And also one can't assimilate more than one can at a certain time. I remember there's a saying in the Zohar, the Kabbalistic book that was written in the 13th century. It says that when somebody's been in prison for a long time, you can only open a tiny aperture at a time, and you can only give a tiny bit of food, because if you give too much, it can overwhelm the system. So this always has to be borne in mind with teaching of any sort. Give a little at a time. So this is where you take the ash that has been gathered from the previous stage of the negredo and the albedo, and you sow it in what they call white foliate earth. I looked up foliate in the dictionary because I didn't know what it meant, and it means leafy or able to regenerate the seed. So it's something that carries the impulse to regeneration in it. And the white foliate earth is the ash left after the burning away of the dross and the calcinatio and the albedo. And it signifies the sowing of the seeds of spirit in the prepared ground of the soul and waiting for them to come up. They don't come up overnight, like sometimes they show it in, where it's speeded up sort of thing, but it takes a long time for these seeds to come up. Coagulatio is a long and difficult stage as one feels the heaviness of being fixed in a life situation that cannot be changed. Even being incarnated on earth without knowing why you're here is a kind of coagulatio. And there may be many years of patient acceptance of some loss or some deep grief. It's really about experiencing at a very deep level the difficulties of spirit being incarnated in matter, because one has to remember spirit is experiencing all this. So one has to wait for the seeds to sprout and grow. And Saturn is the ruler of the coagulatio, holding us down to earth and slowing us down. And I would say this applies particularly to the years 50 to 80. And the body is slowing down, and you have to be careful about where you're walking and how you get onto a bus and all things like that. You become aware of the body can no longer respond quickly to things like it used to do. And you begin to notice that people are treating you in a different way, not necessarily with more respect at all, but as a silly old bag, as my husband sometimes calls me. I won't tell you what I call him. So people may come close to death in this phase and reflecting about death and reflecting about what happens after we die. And there can be a great weariness, particularly as the body grows weaker, as I say. The body also is receiving the higher, finer vibration of spirit, and assimilating this takes time. It can't be done overnight. You can't just get it like that. It takes time to assimilate all this. There can be sorrow that one's work isn't finished. I always think of Coleridge, who was in Malta, and he sent back all his wonderful poems and things by ship, and the ship went down in the Bay of Biscay. So there was a life work lost there that we've been deprived of. But it's that sort of thing, that you've worked and worked and worked, and then it goes down under the sea. There's nothing you can do about it, or it's blown up or something. But it's also, it may be caring for an elderly parent, or having a child return home after a disastrous marriage, which is my own case, looking after grandchildren, enduring an illness, or supporting someone who is ill, which takes a long and devoted application to a task in hand. But it's also about applying passion and love to creative work of some kind, like developing a talent or a project that takes many years to mature. I was thinking of James Lovelock there. It's about bringing down to the level of everyday life everything that one has learned, So insight has to be brought down to the level of body and manifested through the body, through the hands, through the speech, through the ears, through the eyes. Very important to include all these senses in this process. It's also about steadiness of focus. For instance, it's very easy, and I found this many years quite difficult. One part of me said, oh, this is all nonsense, it's taking so much time. Why do you waste your time on this when you could be having a lovely time meeting lots of people, traveling, going around the world, doing other things. You don't have to do this rather heavy, difficult work. Then the other side says, well, maybe, it's worth persevering, it's worth going on. So I've noticed that many years swinging between two different states of consciousness, one focused through the ego and one focused through what I call Jung's concept of the self, which has its own agenda. And it says, please do this work because it's necessary. And so one does it. But it is difficult to keep this steadiness of focus and also taking care not to become inflated by the material. And this was the danger with George Bush and Tony Blair, that they became inflated by the archetype of the hero, really, and of the leader. And they didn't know. If only somebody could have said to them, look, A, this is hubris, and B, you're taken over by the archetype, maybe somebody could have stopped them, but who was going to say that? So it's learning to stay in balance. And this is the fixatio, learning to stay in balance. And it's also about returning to the world after the introversion of previous stages. Now, I thought it was interesting, at a meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, someone asked him, what is the most important form of meditation? And his answer surprised them all, because he said, the most important meditation is critical thinking, followed by action. He said, by critical thinking, I mean inform yourself of what is going on in the world, see what moves us forward and what holds us back, and then translate your insights into action, but do everything with kindness. So he didn't say, spend 40 years meditating. He said, translate what you see needs to be done into some form of action. And I think that's particularly so now, when we have the internet. We have all sorts of means of communication. And we have to follow our intuitions. I remember a wonderful man who's now head of some amazing thing in Costa Rica, and who actually took Costa Rica out of the armaments field and gave all that money to education. And he said, I may get 80 intuitions a day, and I follow all of them. I'll never forget that. He paid attention to what was coming into him. So, infuse all your actions with kindness. This is from a different tradition of painting altogether. It came from a friend in South Africa who sent it to me. So I think the creation of the new consciousness can be compared to the transformation of grapes into wine, or the churning of milk into butter, or turning wheat into bread. Turning of an amateur cook on MasterChef whose hands are shaking with nerves into a professional one who is sure of himself and his creative skills. Any one of us who had a passionate devotion to some form of creative work, or has brought up a child or cared for a grandchild, will know what I mean. The concentration, commitment and love that are demanded act as a kind of filter, extracting the quintessence of spirit to enter into whatever is the matter that life presents one with. In essence, the coagulatio is about the slow, arduous creation of a new consciousness. One is in the kitchen, transforming basic ingredients into the finished dish, but there is present within one a master chef, presiding over one's efforts. And this master chef is the self, what Jung called the self, the new center of consciousness that was always there, but was not either apparent or paid attention to, so to speak. It was latent. It had to be brought forth. So this is the self, and in my own work, it's the self who's gathered all this material together. In my human personality, really, I couldn't have done this. I could have done it in an academic sense, but I couldn't have done it in this deep sense of awareness of connection with the unconscious. So the self has been presiding over this, as it were, like a cook in the kitchen. with me being the kitchen maid. And so we have here, instead of the green lion devouring the sun, we have the green lion regurgitating the sun, regurgitating the new, awakened, illumined conscious mind, or conscious self, if you like. And notice that it's got stars all over its body. And notice that in the reflection in the water is both the sun and the moon. The moon has not been left out, so to speak. Got a male and a female face. The mystery of this phase is that spirit is becoming conscious in us, and we become aware of the heaviness and difficulty of representing spirit in the world. It's easy to become inflated and think we can teach others before we've gone some way with the process of transformation. And this is the danger of all gurus, really, that if they're not aware of this danger, they can get carried away by it. So we have to walk between two worlds, the invisible realm of the subtle body on the one hand, and this world on the other, and realize that these two mysteriously interpenetrate and interact with each other all the time this is happening, this interaction. So we become aware of synchronicities. And here we have the hermaphrodite, who is the rebus of that earlier calcinatio image, transformed into a wonderful image, really. I mean, how they did these things is just incredible. There's not only the image coming to them, but the skill in representing it. So here you have Sol with the red wing and Luna with the white, the red king and the white queen, so to speak. And you have an egg which is being held by both of them, so to speak, which contains the colors of all the phases of the process, the black of the nigredo, the white of the albedo, and the red of the rubedo. The man wears a solar halo and the woman a lunar one. But the process is not quite complete. The body is still clothed in black, which means it's still in the nigredo. The mirror in the center reflects the surrounding landscape, which is also the landscape of the soul. And the landscape within and without the mirror is tinctured with gold. So it shows that this entity is beginning to perceive the relationship between the physical, material reality and the inner, invisible reality. It's so beautiful, that image. I think it's just wonderful. So we have the sublimatio here, a complicated image which I don't fully understand at all. We have the king with the phoenix on the left and the queen with the pelican on the right. We have the tree bearing the golden suns. But we also have Saturn about to slice off the top, I think, of that plant, saying the work isn't yet complete. Be careful. Be careful you don't go too up, high into the air, and forget the need to earth yourself. I think that's what it means.
This triangular shaped object seems to hold a very significant meaning. Do you have any idea?
What the triangular
This vessel is, or whatever.
on the left-hand side, next to the, I think that beast is called a basilisk, and I can't remember but it was a very dangerous beast. So it's just saying, be careful. And I don't know what the central cube is, or the triple thing above it, the strange sort of shape above it.
So the oven thing, the rectangular thing.
I think it could be oven. It's got a sort of grill around it. Anyway, it gives an image of just the work is not complete. You need to bear in mind the coagulatio, Saturn, as well as the sublimatio, because it's very easy, particularly for intuitives, it's very easy to go up into the air and stay there and not be grounded in the body. This is a phase in which much time is devoted to contemplation and meditation. It's about receiving the dew of inspiration and illumination and learning to trust and develop the intuition, but not failing to ground it. and never sacrificing the body to reach the alchemical goal. There can enter into it this sort of thing which again comes from the dragon saying, you've got to reach the goal before the end of life, hurry up, you're way behind, sort of thing. It's that sort of voice which must not be paid attention to, but you just make progress as it happens, not as you wish it to be. The correction to inflation is a return to the nigredo. So one might, if one gets too high up, one might have a depression which pulls one down into the depths again. So Christianity's mistake was the wrong kind of sublimation, believing that spirituality required the sacrifice of the sexual instinct. Spirituality for many, many hundreds of years was associated with asceticism, renunciation and mortification of the flesh. And today the poison from the wound inflicted on the body is erupting into our society, both as the revelation of the atrocious suffering inflicted on children, but also as the current obsession with sexuality. You can't get away. Every paper you open, even the Telegraph, which is supposed to be above all that sort of thing, brings in this whole thing, constant obsession really, and focus on whatever aspect it may be, which is totally secular. There's no awareness that sexuality is actually an extraordinary experience which connects one with spirit. I was thinking here of the tantric system in India, which really gives sexuality its true position, as it were. And also there's the not paying attention to the body, all this drinking with vomiting and everything that's going on in our culture. Jung would have said this is the search for the spirit. This drinking alcohol all the time is actually a need for spirit which is missing. But there's no sense of the sacredness of the body, so the complex hasn't been resolved, however much there's a Dionysian explosion really here. So I think keeping the balance between the conscious mind and the self, the greater eternal being living within one's psyche. The mind mustn't be overpowered and drawn away from life by archetypal ideas. It has to live in this dimension and learn how to relate to the images, but not be identified with them. So here is an image from the Aurora Consurgens about the return of the soul to the body. There you see the knight in the background. He's been killed and the soul has left his body. But here it's returning to him as he rises from the tomb. Beautiful image, so very compressed and eloquent. And around are images of dragons or dragon-like beings in various stages of devouring each other or lying comatose there. So the return of the soul to the body is really a further extension of that albedo stage. It's a kind of repetition of it at a higher level or a more integrated level. It's the experience of love and wisdom and joy. And the aqua sapientiae, or water of wisdom, washes away the darkness. Everything becomes sacred as one begins to reflect on it. It's also about letting go and giving up the desire to interfere or manipulate or control, because one becomes a kind of channel where the divine can act through one. A friend of mine said it was like putting a loo brush through the psyche, in which you create the channel, cleaning it out so that spirit can actually work through one. I think it's a lovely image, that. So the phases of sublimatio and coagulatio are repeated alternately over and over in the process of circulatio until stability is reached. And this is what they call the fixatio, when, as I say, a state of stability is reached. And this lovely saying, they came to themselves, they could accept themselves. Thus they were reconciled to adverse circumstances and events. And I think here we have no better example than the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan teachers who fled Tibet, who had to accept the most horrendous suffering and destruction of their culture, and who've spread all over the world and founded wonderful monasteries and teaching centers where they can carry on their teaching in this Western Hemisphere, which they've taken it as this is part of that destruction and regeneration, so to speak, in their own experience. So, as I said, in this work there's the experience of moving back and forth between two states of consciousness, the one focused on the values and presence of the inner world, and the other on the values and demands of the outer world. And these have gradually to be brought into relationship and balanced until they become fixed and steady, so that one doesn't outweigh the other. This work of balancing and fixating the matter we are working on can be an exhausting and demanding work that can go on for decades. And it's compounded by the difficulty I've put here of communicating this to others. But one just has to take it. Others, people have their own way of living, and one mustn't sort of interfere with that and think that one's way is better. So this beautiful image of the peacock here, which symbolizes the multiplicatio, which is part of the conjunctio phase. So here Venus is presiding over a scene of the delights of celebrating the union of man and woman and the feasting that goes with marriage and the celebration. And they compared this awakened state with the spreading of the peacock's many-eyed tail. They're beginning to see with many eyes, so to speak. The peacock is an image of the flowering of this new kind of consciousness, the 100 eyes that we begin to see with once we begin to move into a deeper relationship with life. And it reflects above all the flowering of the imagination and the capacity to feel related to the whole of creation. And here is an image of the alchemist making gold in huge quantities. He's already got a great basket full and he's making more. And that gold will be the treasure that he's able to give out in some way into his culture. If, like Nicholas Flamel, he was able to achieve the true gold, he gave it out to found these hospitals or whatever else he thought necessary. But it can be the illuminated consciousness, like the Dalai Lama, for instance, who acts as a kind of mentor for the whole world, who has an illumined consciousness. It's a dog scratching itself, probably has fleas, I should think. And I don't know what the figure in the background moving towards the church is. Maybe it is that this is the new, whatever, the new revelation, if you like, and the other one is in the background there. And here we have again this image from the Rosarium, a further stage. It's different from that earlier image. First of all, Sol and Luna are embracing again in this watery dimension, but now they have wings, and Luna is above Sol. Was reversed in the other one. Both have their silver and gold crowns on, and if you notice, the sun and the moon are no longer in the water with them. So it's as if they themselves have embodied this solar and lunar consciousness. And also there's an opening on the right, which there wasn't in the earlier image, which suggests possibly the imminent birth of a child or new consciousness. And here is the solar Sophia again. So she is in contrast to the lunar Sophia, who I showed you before, with the dark face and the white dress, who is rescued from obscurity. And this solar Sophia signifies the full awareness of the power and significance of divine wisdom in the mind of the alchemist. She wears a crown with 12 stars on her head, which you can't quite see. Her dress is blue, the color of the firmament, but also of the divine water of the subtle realm. So the alchemists were careful to say that their union included body, soul, and spirit. They also said that this union could only be brought about gradually and gently. And though the work was apparently against nature, against continuing in bondage to unconscious instinctive patterns, the awakening of instinct could only be accomplished with the assistance of nature. The way to its consummation would be revealed step by step. It couldn't be hurried or forced. So here we have the young king again in the vessel, and above him is Luna, riding in a chariot, and she has brought forth the red tincture, the universal healing medicine, symbolized by the figure of the young king, who stands on an inverted moon and is illumined by the golden rays of the sun. And below that bar, I think, signifies, the red bar signifies the red stone. And there's this beautiful saying which comes from a Hasidic source, the Baal Shem Tov. He said, when the moon shines as brightly as the sun, the Messiah will come. That's an image of the conjunctio, and it's an image of raising the whole consciousness of humanity, not about the coming of a single new Messiah, but this raising of consciousness of humanity until the moon, the feminine principle, shines as brightly as the masculine one. When they're truly balanced, sun and moon are balanced. So we also have this image, an alchemical image of Christ rising from the tomb. And the conjunctio, which is an image of the conjunctio, in one sense is the whole process of psychic transformation and the gradual illumination of consciousness by its ground. But in another, it stands for the final awakening, the final illumination or enlightenment, reflected in this alchemical image of Christ, who is the symbol in the alchemical tradition of the completed stone. So this is something that the alchemist has brought forth. He's brought forth Christ within him, who has emerged from the tomb of the unconscious psyche. So this image signifies resurrection and transfiguration, and the increase of the power to act with insight and compassion, and to heal the great wounds that humanity carries. And this beautiful saying, which I've always loved, it's from one of the Gnostic Gospel, the Gnostic Gospel of Eve, and it really sums up everything that I've been saying. It says, I am thou, and thou art I, and wheresoever thou art, there I am. And I am scattered in all things, and from wherever thou wilt, thou gatherest me. But in gathering me, thou gatherest thyself. And somebody gathered all these Gnostic texts together early in the 20th century. I should know his name, it should trip off my tongue, but I can't. Can anybody, Michael, can you help me there? All the Gnostic texts. Mead, that's who, G.R.S. Mead, that's who it was. Now, he did an incredible work of saving all these texts for us later on, so to speak. There was also a man who wrote a book called Cosmic Consciousness, which really foresaw this illumination that we could move into. Both lived in the early 1900s. So I've put here, this actually was in my seminar on the feminine, but this is not an alchemical image, but my own. And I put the highest qualities that flow from the conjunctio would be wisdom and love, compassion, justice, and the appreciation of beauty. And all these are the values of the heart, which always have been, going right back to the beginning of time. The instinct to heal, to nurture, to protect, and to cherish life in all forms. And I think we can see this impulse gathering strength now, largely, as I said, through the internet, but there are thousands and thousands, or hundreds of thousands, even 1 million different NGOs and people working to help the planet in every kind of way, helping to save life, people in Darfur, people in Africa, in the most remote and difficult places on the earth, people like Médecins Sans Frontières. You know, huge work is being done, which all goes on beneath the surface. It's not noticed, but it's there. Work with conflict resolution, growing steadily stronger. So here we come to, I've got some final images of the completion of the great work. It's a very complex image, but absolutely fascinating. And in the talk that I gave on Thursday on alchemy, There was a man in the audience who could translate that Hebrew word at the top, and he said it means I was, I am, and will be. It's really I am that I am, which comes into the biblical tradition, and which comes very much, this is a Kabbalistic image. So there you have the higher or deeper ground. There you have all the images connected with the alchemical work beneath it. Behind the figure of the alchemist or Kabbalist are all the planetary powers in a sort of semicircle there. He's standing on a lion, two bodies with one head, which water is pouring out of its mouth. And on the right-hand side you have the shamanic tradition, with the shaman with a stag's head, and the woman with a great flow of stars, the lunar woman flowing stars from her breast. Beneath them the eagle. And then on the other side you have Sol with the image of the phoenix underneath, and the lion, the great power of the instinct there. So everything is included, everything is sublimated, but everything is grounded. It's a wonderful image of completion. And who made it? What sort of person made it? What was he? Did he have this in a dream or a vision? I suspect that he did have it in a vision. But he also had the skill to actually manifest it. And here is another image of completion which shows the winged stone in the sky is reflected in the water. And the inscription says, Aurum Ori, gold of gold. And again we have the planetary powers. And this receptacle is connecting the above with the below. So, to summarize, I'm coming near the end, but I've still got some way to go. The alchemist's work to free the quintessential gold of the spirit hidden within our nature from the corruption that had accrued to it, to free the divine life spirit from everything that hides its radiance. Their aim was to make conscious this spirit in themselves, so they could come to full awareness of its presence and guidance. The gradual revelation of the treasure was an experience of great suffering and despair on the one hand, and illumination, wonder, and inexpressible joy on the other, as the light of the new consciousness dawned. No one, they said, may accomplish this work except through affection, humility, and love, for it is the gift of God to his humble servants. Then we come to another beautiful image, where Sol and Luna, as glorified bodies, are surrounded by a circle of stars. Now I think, this is my own interpretation, but I just offer it to you. I think the small circle symbolizes the completed stone, and the square, the ability of the stone to manifest in the world. And the large triangle enclosing them is the union of the Trinity of body, soul, and spirit. And the circle of stars is the connection to the cosmic ground. As a triune whole, Sol and Luna are united in the sacred marriage with the divine ground of being. And you notice the shadows on each side spreading from the sun and moon at their feet. There is an idea that we on this earth are the shadow of our cosmic bodies, as it were. We are the manifestation in this dimension of our subtle body, or our resurrection body, or our higher self, or whatever you want to call it. And so it's included there. What we are is included in this sublimated image of the final conjunctio. So the final stage of alchemy and the completion of the great work gave rise to a state of consciousness that united the solar and lunar ways of knowing in a third state that the alchemists called stellar consciousness. That's starry consciousness. And the Egyptian alchemists already called this final state living in truth. They called it stellar consciousness because they were very conscious of the stars and the whole idea of the body of the pharaoh returning to the starry realm. and the connection with what they call the duat, or the invisible world. So, in the view of the alchemists, we're all treading the path of return to the stars. So this is a kind of final summing up of hidden within man there exists a heavenly and divine light which cannot be placed in man from without, but must emerge from within. Now, to end, although there are many individuals from many cultures who have experienced it, I'd like to offer you the words of two individuals whose testimony I find deeply moving and who've experienced the light of the divine ground. They've actually experienced it and put it into words. One are the words of a man called Gopi Krishna, who described the long-term effects of his Kundalini experience many years after the event itself. And this is published in a book called Kundalini Yoga, I think. I've got a copy of it, and it's described in an interview that he gave. It's called Kundalini Rising, the book, and it's got all kinds of experiences of different people who've had this Kundalini experience. And he says, in his view, that the stage is being set for a movement from the external world to the inner world of consciousness, that an unlived potential of human consciousness, a supersensory channel of cognition, is being activated in humanity and will in time manifest in our species. We may eventually be able to discover the answer to the question, how does eternal consciousness come to be embodied and then rise step by step through Ionian spans of time to the realization of its own sovereignty? And also the question of how this process is revealed in the organic evolution of the brain. These are his words. Bearing witness to the fact that the supersensory channel of cognition has been opened in himself, he writes that at every moment of his life he lives in two worlds. One is the sensory world which we all share together, and my reactions to this world are the same as of other human beings. But the other is an amazing supersensory world. I am always conscious of a luminous glow, not only in my interior, but pervading the whole field of my vision during the hours of my wakefulness. I literally live in a world of light. It is as if a light were burning in my interior, filling me with a luster so beautiful and so ravishing that my attention is again and again drawn to it. I do not claim that I see God, but I am conscious of a living radiance both within and outside myself. In other words, I have gained a new power of perception that was not present before, a new power of perception that was not present before. The luminosity does not end with my waking time, it persists in my dreams. The enchanting light I perceive both internally and outside is alive. It pulsates with life and intelligence. It is like an infinite ocean of awareness pervading my own small pool of consciousness within, and the whole universe I perceive with my senses outside. So for me, the universe is alive. A stupendous intelligence that I can sense but never fathom looms behind every object and every event in the universe, silent, still, serene, and immovable like a mountain. It is a staggering spectacle. That's very, very clear. Secondly, these words of Christopher Bache from a book called Dark Night, Early Dawn, which has had a great influence on me. And he says, I was brought to an encounter with a unified energy field underlying all physical existence. I was confronting an enormous field of blindingly bright, incredibly intense energy. This energy was the single energy that comprised all existence. The unified field underlying physical existence completely dissolved all boundaries. As I moved deeper into it, all borders fell away. All appearances of division were ultimately illusory. Though these experiences were extraordinary in their own right, the most poignant aspect was not the discovered dimensions of the universe themselves, but what my seeing and understanding them meant to the consciousness I was with. It seemed so pleased to have someone to show its work to. I felt that it had been waiting for billions of years for embodied consciousness to evolve to the point where we could at last begin to see, understand, and appreciate what had been accomplished. It needs appreciation as much as we do, evidently. I felt the loneliness of this intelligence, having created such a masterpiece and having no one to appreciate its work. And I wept. I wept for its isolation and in awe of the profound love which had accepted this isolation as part of a larger plan. Behind creation lies a love of extraordinary proportions, and all of existence is an expression of this love. The intelligence of the universe's design is equally matched by the depth of love that inspired it. Now I come to the last part of my thing, which I'm going to mainly read, if you don't mind, although I've been reading quite a lot. This is a painting by my husband, which I think expresses this coming through of this new revelation, if you like, that's coming through science, but is also coming from deeper traditions in our culture. As they watch the matter of their own psychic life transform in the mirror of the alchemical retort, the alchemists experienced the immense mystery of what they were witnessing. They realized that they were assisting spirit in the evolutionary effort of bringing itself to consciousness over eons of earth time, leading its creation back to the source. They had revealed to them in a gradual process of illumination the innate divinity of nature and all life processes. And they saw that one divine spirit was at work in all forms of life and in human consciousness as well. They sought to bring to birth in themselves the hidden spirit that longed to be rescued from its buried state. And in accomplishing this double act of redemption, they became the sons of divine wisdom, inheritors of the true philosophical gold. And they became the ministers, not the masters of the stone, their lives illumined and guided by the Holy Spirit, eternally pouring forth the water of life. Alchemy is the Western tradition of inner psychic transformation. It is a feminine mystery, a mystery of the soul. The symbols yield their secret to those who contemplate them, and the process of transformation is unique for each one of us, yet intrinsically the same for all. This is the slow creation of the wondrous stone, the vision of the Holy Grail, the healing with the alchemical gold. This invisible yet immanent Holy Spirit is the flow of life in our veins, the flux and flow of our thoughts, the power of our instincts, the miracle of our bodily processes, the creative passion of our imagination. It is the blazing revelation of the divinity of life in the reunion of body, soul, and spirit, and the service of that life with whatever creative gifts it has bestowed upon us. The gradual creation of the treasure is an experience of great suffering and sacrifice on the one hand, and illumination, wonder, and inexpressible joy on the other, as the light of the unified consciousness dawns. This is another painting by my husband, which he painted many, many years ago, but which is neither male nor female, but hopefully transcends both polarities. And it's encased in this great wave of the quantum field, if you like. No one, the alchemist said, may accomplish this work except through affection, humility, and love. To return to the ground from which we have come, so completing our evolutionary journey on this planet and bringing the consciousness of the planet with us, is one of the most exciting quests that I can imagine. To discover that spirit, so long projected onto a God remote from ourselves and creation, is the quintessential consciousness which is awaiting discovery, both in nature and ourselves, is one of the greatest revelations that it is possible to experience. The other revelation, no less overwhelming, is that we have the extraordinary privilege of helping this divine consciousness to achieve its evolutionary goal. In awakening to our soul, in discovering how to relate to it, transform it, heal its wounds, and listen to its guidance, to receive its dreams and reflect on its visions, we help to bring about that conscious marriage with the ground of life, which I believe is the tremendous destiny of the human race. Because at the quantum level we're all connected, when thousands of us begin to change our consciousness, millions are affected. I believe that we can heal the terrible errors our beliefs have inflicted. We can choose whether to continue in these beliefs or to live and act from a different relationship with life. As we do so, we would begin to align ourselves with the luminous ground of reality. Our minds would serve the deepest longings of our hearts, the deepest wisdom of our soul. We would transmit the life and love flowing from this ground, and we would know who we are and why we are here. In doing this, we would begin to live the dream of the cosmos. Thank you very much. Right, now are there any questions? Thank you very much.
That picture that's there now looks more like a tsunami to me. I hope it's not engulfing us all.
No, it's not a tsunami. It's really, I think it's this invisible dimension which is containing the essence of this spirit that I've been talking about. It's not a threatening image. At least to my mind it isn't. It's got all sorts of cellular things in its possibilities, hints of what might be able to come about.
You said that process, the transformation process, would be a circular process. Does that mean that, does it only circulate within this final phase of the Robideaux, or does it actually circle in a way that it starts all over with a Nigredo and then the Albedo again?
The whole process may have these phases coming at different stages, and one may go back and repeat certain things. I think it's more like a spiral than a circle. I think you move, as you understand more, you may go through the same phases, but they may not last as long, or they may bring different insights, or maybe different work in the world. One just doesn't know. Coagulatio may be quite different in one's early life as it is at the end of one's life. And the same with the albedo and the Robideaux. I mean, one may have glimpses of the Robideaux in one's 20s or 30s, as with that extraordinary dream I had, but it may take 50 years for it to come to fruition or completion.
So it's a lifelong
process with, and many lives, I think many lives.
Okay.
And I just wondered if this dark wave and the image where you had Sol and Luna and the marriage, and then those difficult images still there below, when you were talking about what scientists have discovered, you didn't mention anything about dark matter or dark flow,
energy.
Dark energy. And I wonder whether something that's containing everything is there yet to be discovered in that dark energy and the dark flow, which very excitingly somebody talked about on television not very long ago on a Horizon programme. I
think it could be, because we only see 4% of the universe. Yeah. So what is that other 96% that we can't see? And I mean, this is very exciting for scientists, and the idea of the black hole, that maybe we disappear into that and that goes into another dimension. These are fascinating ideas, and it's going to take probably generations to work them out. But why not? Why couldn't it be dark energy?
And the lady over here mentioned or asked the question that could you understand if all this quite complex sequence of alchemy could be translated in a simplistic way? But my simplistic answer is I think there would be great difficulty in ever doing that. You can't really grasp this or reach the state of consciousness to become aware of it without doing all the work. I'm reminded in Persia, the great Sufi mystic Attar, who lived in the 10th century, he identified seven identifiable stages of the evolution of consciousness, which perhaps run parallel to this. And he describes these, or he uses the terminology, the 7 valleys. Actually, I think you can see how you can trace the origin of that, or the roots, back to the great epic of Gilgamesh. But those 7 valleys, well, the names of them are the Valley of Search, the Valley of Love, the Valley of Knowledge, Unity, then Contentment, and then Wonderment, and then the Valley of Absolute Poverty and Nothingness. Well, I used to read this for years and years and never understood anything of it at all until life circumstances entered into all sorts of traumas, and then by good fortune and by the will of the gods I met my first esoteric teacher who just began to explain parts of it to me. And in retrospect, I think it's only by going through the processes, having teachers, that eventually this comes to you. It's interesting, in the work of Attar, it's explained symbolically. He could have written it down word for word, but the idea is if you're ready, you will find it.
You'll find the meaning of it, yes. But I think that's so with all the great teachings of the different traditions, that there are the teachers there, but life will bring you to the teachers when you're ready, and then you do the work and it is integrated into your own particular life circumstances and everything. But it takes time, and sometimes it comes suddenly, but to most people it comes much more slowly, I think. And we just have to go at the pace that one can assimilate. Question at the back? Thank you.
I have a feeling someone more nimble should be doing this. Not really a question, just a response to that, and it's Scylla's remarks earlier. Your own book, The Birds Who Flew Beyond Time, tell that Attar story beautifully for children.
Yes.
And that is actually a way of, if you think of this journey as a spiral, that there's one spiral that will relate to children and the next will relate to other people. So you're going through it again and again, and it's the people who really understand the process who can simplify it to the degree that a child could understand it.
Could I just ask you a question? I have a slight problem with the idea of eternity being goal-directed, which seems to be implicit in some of the statements that I'm hearing. I mean, certainly the journey itself is goal-directed, but how far can one take that?
I think that when we move out of this dimension, we move out of time and space, which is the way we see life here. But from the eternal point of view, there is no goal, because it is everything. There's no beginning and no end. It just is. But from our point of view, there is a goal.
But where does one end and the other start? I mean, I think that's probably the crux of the question.
I can't answer that.
No.
I can't answer that. That has to be worked out by each person.
Perhaps the journey is the goal.
I think so, because it's in doing this, whatever creative work, that opens the goal to one in a way. And who knows what happens after we die, after we've assimilated all this. It may make death and dying much easier. That's one thing that it can do. It can ease the passage.
But from what you now said, it seems as if alchemy really describes the great work we do through all our incarnations till we eventually reach the point when we have reached this final state of wholeness, and that would then mean we would not have to come back anymore, because then it is complete.
It's complete.
As long as we're still here, we're still doing the work.
Yeah, we're doing the work. But on the other hand, the Buddha said, he said that the bodhisattvas come back, having completed this, they come back to help the rest of humanity.
Because they
reach.
wish, but not because they have to.
They don't have to. They have to choose. Yeah, they choose to come back. And I think there's a great saying of the Bodhisattva that I will not rest until all beings are brought out of the ocean of illusion. It's there so much in all the traditions, really. Did somebody put their hand up at the back? Or you did?
Only really to say that perhaps the Buddha never really leaves because there is no separation.
That's a good point, yes.
Because the concept of death, as I think you said at the beginning, is one of separation, and it's been created as it's given as a framework which has separated us
from eternity.
Sorry?
It has separated us from eternity.
Yeah, and from the allness.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, if there is no separation, there is no separation. It's just a perceptual quality that the human condition imposes for us to discern and work through.
I think it's a construction that we've put on reality.
Yes.
And that's what all the Negredo is about, is dismantling that construction.
Yes, and then it dissolves those concepts, and then there is no beginning and no end.
Mm-hmm. Well put.
And I really just wanted to thank you, because as we've gone through today, I've been just conscious that this is a life's work you've put into this. And how you've assembled and made sense of all this information and pieced it together with these fabulous images, which I know is what you live through, that speak so clearly and so eloquently alongside your voice. And it's really a gift that you've given to, I hope, thousands and thousands of people, of understanding this process, which is so very ancient, and bringing it right into our world. Thank you.
It has been like a detective story, like an Agatha Christie, really. You know, tracking down who did it and who's underneath it all. But it's been very, very interesting. And I think at 20, I kind of knew that this is what I wanted to find out. And I'm quite happy to die now because I have found out. I feel that
you've got a lot more to do yet.
I'm not going yet. But there is a feeling that you had to find out something, just like there's a treasure that you need to find.
You helped the stone.
Help the stone, yes. Did you want to ask a question, anybody else? Or say something? Thank you, Scylla, for that. That's very nice.
It was just an observation, really, that as we think that we're coming to the end of our life, we find it's a new beginning. And I'm sure that will happen with you, that you're starting a new cycle, perhaps, in some way.
I hope so.
But for me, again, just like Scylla, to say thank you, because I shall certainly buy the DVD. And I have a feeling that my family and grandchildren in years to come will still be enjoying it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I actually am making it for my daughter and grandchild too, because at the moment they're not particularly interested, but one day it may come that they can see this and understand, which would be very nice. So do you think we should call it a day? Thank you very much.
And it's my privilege to thank you for giving us this wonderful talk, and we will carry it. You have created this space, you have chosen this space, and in this field you have given us marvelous ideas. You've told us about the imagination, and now it's up to us to manifest it and to carry it.
And this is a great work that you have. And you know the power of oral tradition to actually speak it. Yeah. When I first contacted you, you said, I'm too old, I'm on the internet, and I've written books. And that's it. And I just said, no, please, give us a myth for our time. Okay. And really, you have done that, as far as I'm concerned, in The Birds That Flew Beyond Time. It's not just for children. It's the Mother Earth crying out to us birds, souls, for help. And you've shown us the valleys, you've shown us the difficulties, and you've shown us the light at the end. So I just want to thank you, and I hope you'll see a lot of you. There's no way you talk about Swan Song. It just does not come in.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you, Florence, very much. I was going to say that if anybody has any ideas for future meetings, I do like communicating, there's no doubt about it. And I like, having led a very retiring and contemplative life, cut off from sort of the whole social world of my time and everything, I enjoy meeting people. So if anybody has any ideas for, I thought I'd sort of given my all in the one on the feminine and this one, but maybe there's some other subject that you would all be interested in. I like these rooms. It's not beyond my financial means to manage this thing. So you can put your suggestions through Jane or through me through my website. But thank you all for your participation, because it's lovely to feel this relationship when one is giving a talk, that it's being actually received. It's a great privilege and a pleasure. So thank you.